Hey, what is up everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists a warrior whose very name is spoken in hushed whispers among those who know of his deeds. A figure so immense, so terrifying, so utterly ruthless, that even the hardened veterans of the Adeptus Astartes speak of him with a mixture of reverence and dread. This is not a Primarch from the ancient days of legend. This is not some fallen champion corrupted by the dark gods. This is Tyberos, known throughout the Imperium and beyond by a title that perfectly encapsulates the trail of carnage he leaves in his wake. They call him the Red Wake, and his story is one written in the blood of countless enemies across the void dark reaches of space, where few dare to tread. The tale of Tyberos is inseparable from the chapter he leads. A brotherhood of warriors who operate in the deepest shadows of the galaxy, far from the light of the Astronomicon, hunting humanity's enemies in places so remote that entire civilizations could rise and fall without the Imperium ever knowing they existed. These are the Carcharodons Astra, the space sharks, and Tyberos stands as their shade lord, their chapter master, their supreme predator. To understand the full horror and majesty of this warrior, we must first understand the dark waters from which he emerged and the terrible purpose that drives him and his grey-armored brothers through the endless night. The galaxy knows many space marine chapters. Some are celebrated throughout the Imperium, their heraldry recognized on 1,000 worlds, their battle honors sung in the cathedrals of countless planets. The Ultramarines, with their rigid adherence to the Codex Astartes, the Blood Angels, forever cursed by the Black Rage yet fighting with artistic fury, the Space Wolves, whose savage nobility is legend. But the Carcharodons are different. They are not celebrated. They are not sung about in hymns. When they appear, it is without fanfare, without announcement, like predators emerging from deep ocean trenches where light has never penetrated. They arrive in silence, they wage war with methodical brutality, and then they vanish back into the void, leaving behind only corpses and questions. Tyberos embodies everything that makes his chapter both feared and respected. Standing at the apex of a brotherhood already renowned for ruthlessness, he takes the characteristics of the Carcharodons to their absolute extreme. Where his battle brothers are silent, he speaks only in whispers so soft they seem to promise death itself. Where his warriors are brutal, his savagery in combat has earned him a reputation that spans sectors. Where the chapter fights with calculated precision, Tyberos moves through enemy ranks like a living catastrophe, his unique weapons tearing through armor and flesh with an efficiency that witnesses struggle to comprehend. He is massive even among the giants of the Adeptus Astartes, yet moves with a speed that seems to defy physics. He is the ultimate predator in a chapter of predators, the apex hunter in a brotherhood of hunters, and his legend grows with each engagement, each campaign, each world that falls beneath the shadow of his presence. The imperial records concerning Tyberos are sparse, fragmentary, often contradictory. Much of what is known comes from accounts given by those who have fought alongside the Carcharodons, and even these reports are filled with gaps and uncertainties. The Inquisition maintains files on him, but even their extensive archives contain more questions than answers. What is certain is that Tyberos serves as both chapter master of the Carcharodons and master of their first company, the elite Red Brethren, who form his personal guard, and the tip of the spear in the chapter's most dangerous operations. He commands from the ancient battle barge Nikor, a vessel whose origins stretch back to the Great Crusade itself, a ship that has sailed the dark between stars for millennia, hunting prey that lesser warriors would flee from in terror. But who is Tyberos, truly? What manner of being wears that ancient Terminator armor and wields those terrible weapons? What experiences forged him into the ruthless commander he has become? To answer these questions, we must journey into the darkness, far beyond the comfortable light of the Imperium's core worlds, out to the edges where the galaxy frays into the vast emptiness beyond. We must understand the Carcharodons themselves, for they are the ocean in which this apex predator swims, and their story is his story, their purpose, his purpose, their methods reflected and amplified in his every action. The Carcharodons. Astra, shadows in the void. The origins of the Carcharodons are shrouded in mystery and myth, deliberately obscured by the passage of millennia and perhaps by design. What is known for certain is that the chapter is ancient, with records suggesting its existence as far back as late M32, during a tumultuous period known as the Astropath Wars. But the true beginning of their story likely reaches even further back, to the dark days of the Horus Heresy and its immediate aftermath, to a time when the Imperium was still reeling from betrayal and the surviving loyalist legions were being broken apart and reorganized into the chapter system that would define the Adeptus Astartes for the next 10,000 years. Among the fragmentary histories that survive from that period, buried in archives that few have clearance to access and fewer still would want to read, there are references to something called the Day of Exile. The Carcharodons speak of this event in hushed tones, a sacred but terrible moment in their history when the wandering ancestors, the first members of what would become their chapter, were sent forth from their homeworld and ordered beyond the galaxy's edge. They speak of a figure they call the Forgotten One, an individual whose identity is lost to time, but whose authority was absolute, who gave these exiled warriors a remit that would define them forever. They were to travel the empty spaces beyond the Imperium's borders, seemingly forever, to seek out and destroy the enemies of mankind without mercy, to become instruments of the Emperor's wrath in places so remote that no other force could reach them. This was not a punishment in the traditional sense, though the term exile suggests disgrace. Rather, it was a sacred duty, a terrible burden placed upon warriors who had proven themselves capable of the darkest work. They were to become the Imperium's defense against threats that emerged from the outer darkness, the first line of defense against horrors that would later attempt to breach the galaxy's borders. And they were given a pattern of warfare to sustain themselves in this eternal hunt, a system known as the nomad predation pattern, rare even among the fleet-based chapters, that would allow them to maintain themselves indefinitely without a fixed homeworld or reliable supply lines from the Imperium proper. The nomad predation fleet that the Carcharodons operate is unlike the crusade fleets of other chapters. Rather than a single unified armada moving together, it consists of multiple autonomous battle shoals, each led by a company master who bears additional titles reflecting their specialized duties. Some are Reaper Primes, responsible for seeking out fresh recruits to replace losses. Others are Harvester Primes, tasked with finding archaeotech and lost technology. These shoals operate independently for years or even decades at a time, ranging across the void dark beyond the Imperium's edges, hunting Xenos and traitors in regions where Imperial authority is a distant memory or has never reached at all. Only periodically do they reunite with the main fleet, with the Nicor at its heart, to share resources, exchange intelligence, and receive new directives from their Shade Lord. This isolation, this existence on the knife's edge of survival, has shaped the Carcharodons into something unique even among the already diverse tapestry of Adeptus Astartes chapters. They are not like the proud sons of Guilliman, who see themselves as lords and protectors. They are not like the savage but honorable warriors of Fenris who fight for the glory of their deeds. The Carcharodons have shed such concepts. They fight because it is their purpose, their penance, their eternal duty. Glory means nothing to them. Honor, in the traditional sense, is an irrelevance. What matters is the completion of their mission, the death of the enemy, the continuation of their chapter, so that the hunt can go on. They are creatures of the void, shaped by the darkness they swim through, and they have become reflections of that darkness themselves. This philosophy manifests in every aspect of their culture. A Carcharodon warrior does not seek individual renown. When a recruit is accepted into the chapter, they are stripped of their birth name and given a new identity drawn from the chapter's history, along with a numerical designation. They become part of a greater whole, a single tooth in the jaws of a vast predator that hunts at the galaxy's edge. They spend long periods in Susan membrane suspension, sleeping away the years between campaigns to conserve resources and extend their operational lifespans. When awake, they favor solitary contemplation over companionship. They rarely remove their helms, even among their own kind. They communicate through void vows, sacred oaths and declarations that carry more weight than casual conversation. And in battle, they fight in near total silence, without battle cries or boasts, an eerie quiet that unnerves enemies accustomed to the roaring fury of Imperial forces. The chapter's appearance reflects this austere, predatory nature. Their armor is grey, the color of deep ocean waters, where light fails to penetrate, marked with Polynesian-inspired tattoos and tribal patterns that speak to an ancient cultural influence. Many warriors file their teeth to points, a practice that serves both practical and symbolic purposes. Their eyes are often pure black, soulless, and depthless, a characteristic that some attribute to their gene seed while others whisper might be a side effect of the chapter's methods or origins. They are death pale, corpse white, their skin seemingly leached of color by the void through which they travel. To see a Carcharodon with their helmet removed is to see something that seems to hover on the border between human and something else, something shaped by the terrible purpose that drives them. But perhaps the most distinctive aspect of the Carcharodons is their recruitment practices, the methods by which they replenish their numbers and maintain their strength, despite the horrendous attrition of their eternal war. Other chapters recruit from specific worlds, building relationships with populations that view it as an honor to send their sons to join the Adeptus Astartes. The Carcharodons have no such luxury. Instead, they possess something called the Edicts of Exile, ancient writs that grant them specific rights despite their outcast status. Chief among these is the right of the Red Tithe, a practice so brutal that it borders on the horrifying even by the grim standards of the 41st Millennium. When a battle shoal's numbers have been depleted by war, when losses mount to the point that the shoal's combat effectiveness is threatened, the Reaper Prime will invoke the Red Tithe. The Carcharodons will descend upon an imperial world, usually one far from the Imperium's heart, often a prison planet or harsh death world, and they will take what they need. The vast majority of those taken will become chapter serfs and slaves, the human labor force necessary to maintain the fleet and keep the ships functioning across the years and decades between resupply. But those of the right age and temperament, those who show the potential to survive the brutal transformation into a space marine, will face the trials. These trials are harsher than those of most chapters. The Carcharodons do not have time or resources for a lengthy process of testing and training. Their need is immediate, and their standards are absolute. Often, they will simply have the aspirants fight each other to the death, taking only the survivors. It is a wasteful method by the standards of the Codex Astartes, but it produces exactly the kind of ruthless, survival-driven warriors that the chapter requires. The attrition rate is horrifying. For every aspirant who emerges from the trials as a scout, dozens or even hundreds have died. But those who survive, those who prove themselves worthy of the black eyes and grey armor, become part of something larger than themselves, part of a hunting pack that has ranged the void for 10,000 years. And then there is the Grey Tithe, the other pillar that supports the chapter's existence. While other chapters receive regular supplies from the Adeptus Mechanicus, based on ancient pacts and feudal obligations, the Carcharodons must trade for what they need. The Harvester Primes seek out archaeotech, ancient technology from the Dark Age or the Great Crusade. relics that the Mechanicus prizes above almost all else. These treasures are gathered from dead worlds and forgotten battlefields, from ruins that predate the Imperium itself, wrested from Xenos and traitors who would use them for their own purposes. When the chapter reunites at gathering points like the mysterious Lost World, they conduct the Grey Tithe with representatives of the Mechanicus, trading these technological wonders for the arms, armor, ammunition, and equipment they need to continue their hunt. It is a precarious existence, always on the edge of disaster, always one campaign away from being too depleted to recover. The Carcharodons struggle constantly to maintain their numbers and equipment in the Outer Dark, facing extinction as a chapter with each major engagement. But they endure, as they have endured for millennia, because endurance is what they were made for. They are survivors, predators shaped by an environment that would kill lesser warriors, and at their head, embodying all their ruthless efficiency and cold determination, stands Tyberos, the Red Wake. The appearance of a nightmare. To look upon Tyberos is to understand immediately why even hardened Imperial soldiers speak of him with dread. He is not merely a large space marine in Terminator armor. He is something that seems to transcend the normal boundaries of what such a warrior should be, pushing against the limits of biology and engineering to become something approaching the Primarchs themselves in terms of sheer physical presence and menace. The first thing that strikes witnesses is his size. Space Marines are enormous compared to baseline humans, standing well over 7 feet tall in their power armor, their bodies transformed by the gene seed and augmentation into living weapons. Terminators are larger still, encased in tactical dreadnought armor that makes them walking fortresses, broader and more imposing than standard power armor could ever achieve. But Tyberos towers over even his fellow Terminators. In the novel Outer Dark, he is described as standing a full head taller than his Red Brethren Honor Guard, themselves elite First Company veterans in Terminator plate. He seems to dwarf those around him. Utterly immovable, a vast presence that dominates any space he occupies. The text describes him as a giant, as a supreme predator, using vocabulary that is normally reserved only for the Primarchs themselves. This is not simply a matter of wearing bulkier armor. Tyberos' suit is heavily modified to accommodate his stature, custom-built to house a frame that could not fit into standard Terminator plate. The armor itself is archaic, clearly of ancient manufacture, bearing design elements that suggest it dates back to the Great Crusade or even earlier. The pattern is unusual, unknown to many tech priests, covered in heavy studded panels that give it a prehistoric, almost barbaric appearance. Unlike most Terminators, Tyberos does not wear the Crux Terminatus over his left shoulder, that badge of honor granted to those who have earned the right to wear tactical dreadnought armor. Whether this is because his suit predates that tradition or because he simply does not care for such symbols is unclear. The armor's servo bundles are thicker than normal, throbbing with the vast power necessary to move Tyberos' massive frame. Even standing still, the suit seems to radiate barely contained force, its machine spirit laboring to contain and direct the strength of the warrior within. It is scarred and pitted by countless battles, repaired and maintained by generations of tech marines, but bearing the marks of wars that stretch back through the centuries. Trophy skulls hang from chains at his waist, a decoration more commonly associated with Chaos Space Marines than Loyalists, but Tyberos wears them without apology. They are trophies of his kills, physical manifestations of the thousands of enemies who have fallen before him, and they rattle with each step he takes, a quiet percussion of death. His helmet is perhaps the most distinctive part of his armor, designed to resemble a shark, the predator that lends the Carcharodons their name. The faceplate is shaped into a maw, suggesting rows of teeth, while the overall silhouette evokes the streamlined killer of the deep oceans. It is a deliberate choice, a statement of identity and purpose. When enemies see that helmet emerging from the smoke and chaos of battle, when they see that shark-like visage bearing down on them, they know exactly what is about to happen. They are prey, and Tyberos is the predator, and there will be no mercy, no hesitation. only the mechanical efficiency of a perfect killing machine doing what it was designed to do. But as terrifying as his armor is, it is nothing compared to what lies beneath. On the rare occasions when Tyberos has been seen without his helmet, witnesses have struggled to describe what they saw without their voices breaking. The lore speaks of his face as a corpse-white nightmare, death pale in a way that goes beyond the normal paleness of the Carcharodons. Half the bones of his face are exposed in a bloodless grimace, whether through injury, mutation, or some deliberate modification is unclear. The flesh that remains is stretched tight over his skull, angular and gaunt, giving him a skeletal appearance even while alive. And his eyes, his terrible eyes, are described as soulless and depthless black, completely devoid of white or any other color, like twin voids that look out at the world with an intelligence that is utterly inhuman. There is something shark-like about his features, though whether this is literal genetic modification or simply the cumulative effect of his appearance is debated. Some who have seen him swear that his mouth is filled with more teeth than a human should possess, filed to points, multiple rows that suggest the regenerating teeth of a predator. Others claim his skin has a texture that seems slightly wrong, a roughness that hints at scales or some other deviation from normal human flesh. The truth is difficult to discern, and Tyberos does not offer explanations to those who would study him. He simply is, and his appearance is accepted as one more mystery among the many that surround the chapter master of the Carcharodons. His voice completes the nightmare. In any other warrior of his size and ferocity, one would expect a booming roar, commands bellowed across the battlefield with the volume necessary to be heard over the din of war. But Tyberos speaks only in whispers, soft susurrations that somehow carry despite their volume, that cut through the noise of battle to reach those he addresses. These are not the harsh rasps of a damaged Vox system, or the quiet intensity of someone trying not to be overheard. These are deliberate whispers, each word pronounced with perfect clarity, each syllable carrying the weight of absolute authority and the promise of certain death. Those who have heard him speak describe the experience as profoundly unsettling, as if something that should be shouting or roaring has instead chosen to adopt the tones of a predator that does not need volume to convey menace. Imagine facing him on the battlefield. Imagine being a warrior of chaos, having carved through Imperial soldiers with contempt, confident in your abilities and your dark blessings. And then, the grey tide arrives, the Carcharodons emerging from the smoke in near silence. And at their head comes Tyberos. You see his massive form first, nearly twice your height, a walking fortress of ancient ceramite and adamantium. You see the shark helmet, the trophy skulls, the weapons that no sane armorer would have created. And then, if you are close enough, you see him remove that helmet for just a moment, and you glimpse that corpse-white face with its exposed bones and black soulless eyes. You hear him whisper a single word, an order to his warriors or perhaps a judgment upon you, and the voice carries somehow, cutting through every sound around you to reach your ears with perfect clarity. In that moment, you understand that you are not fighting a space marine. You are facing something else, something that wears the shape of a man, but has become a manifestation of death itself. And there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, because predators can always smell the fear of their prey. This is Tyberos the Red Wake. This is the Shade Lord of the Carcharodons Astra. This is the Reaper Lord of the Void. And when he goes to war, he carries with him weapons that are worthy of such a terrifying figure. Artifacts of unknown origin that have carved a legend written in the blood of thousands. Hunger and Slake. Weapons of the Apex. Predator. Even among the legendary weapons wielded by the heroes of the Adeptus Astartes, the armament that Tyberos carries into battle stands out as something unique, something that defies easy categorization. These weapons, known as Hunger and Slake, are ancient relics whose origin and manufacture are unknown even to the tech priests of Mars. They are gauntlet-based, worn over Tyberos's massive fists, and they combine multiple weapon systems into a single nightmarish package that exemplifies the Red Wake's approach to war: brutal, efficient, and absolutely lethal. To understand Hunger and Slake, we must first understand the weapons they incorporate. A Power Fist is a standard close combat weapon for Space Marines, using an energized power field to increase its striking power to devastating levels. A single blow from a Power Fist can shatter ceramite armor, crush bones to powder, and pulp flesh into an unrecognizable mess. They are slow weapons, requiring considerable strength to wield effectively, but their destructive potential is unmatched in melee combat. Lightning claws, conversely, are weapons of precision and speed, multiple energized talons extending from a gauntlet, allowing the wielder to rend and tear through enemy armor with rapid strikes. They are favored by assault specialists who prefer mobility and swift kills. And chain fists combine the power of a Power Fist with a rotating chain blade, allowing them to saw through even the heaviest armor or reinforced structures, making them essential for boarding actions and siege warfare. Hunger and Slake incorporate all three of these weapon systems into a single integrated design. Each gauntlet features the broad striking surface and power field generator of a Power Fist as its base. From the top of each gauntlet extend multiple lightning claw blades, 4 or 5 energized talons that curve forward like the claws of some prehistoric monster. And over the palm of each hand, where one would expect to see fingers, there is instead a rotating chain blade assembly, the howling adamantium teeth of a chain fist, creating an inner maw lined with vicious teeth that can saw through virtually anything. The overall effect is of a weapon that resembles a shark's head, appropriate for the master of the Carcharodons, with the lightning claws forming the upper jaw and the chain fist creating the lower maw. The manufacture of these weapons is entirely unknown. They bear no forge marks that the Adeptus Mechanicus recognizes. Their pattern does not match any known STC template or recorded design from the Great Crusade. Some tech priests who have examined them from a distance speculate that they might be from the Dark Age of technology, created before the rise of the Imperium itself, when humanity's technological prowess far exceeded what it would later achieve. Others suggest they might be of Xenos origin, though this seems unlikely given that they are clearly designed for human hands, albeit extraordinarily large human hands. A few whisper that they might be artificer creations, one-of-a-kind weapons crafted by some long-dead master who has left no other trace of their existence. What is certain is that Hunger and Slake are considered chapter relics of the Carcharodons, artifacts of immense value that have been passed down through the chapter's leadership over the centuries. Whether Tyberos inherited them when he became Shade Lord or claimed them through some other means is unclear. What matters is that in his hands, these already formidable weapons become instruments of pure devastation, tools that allow him to carve through enemy forces with a speed and efficiency that seems impossible for someone of his massive size. In combat, Tyberos can alternate between the different weapon modes on each gauntlet depending on what his target requires. Against heavily armored foes, the chain fist components roar to life, their adamantium teeth capable of soaring through the thickest ceramite or even the reinforced hulls of vehicles. The scream of those chain blades is often the last sound his enemies hear, a howling mechanical shriek that announces their death in the seconds before impact. Against lightly armored targets or when facing multiple opponents, the lightning claws flash out, each strike tearing through flesh and bone, each swipe of those energized talons removing limbs or opening arteries. The power fields that surround the claws disrupt molecular bonds, ensuring that even grazing strikes cause catastrophic damage. And for pure crushing power, the Power Fist aspect of the weapons comes into play, delivering impacts with the force of a runaway vehicle, breaking spines, shattering skulls, and reducing enemy warriors to broken heaps of shattered armor and pulped flesh with single blows. Tyberos can mix these fighting styles within the same engagement, switching seamlessly between modes as the tactical situation demands. His centuries of experience allowing him to assess and respond to threats with split-second timing. It is this versatility, combined with his unnatural speed and massive strength, that makes him such a devastating combatant. But hunger and slake are more than just weapons. They are symbols of Tyberos' role within the chapter, physical manifestations of the predatory nature that defines the Carcharodons. The shark-like appearance of the gauntlets, with their tooth-like blades and maw-like configuration, directly invokes the chapter's totem animal. When Tyberos raises these weapons in battle, when his warriors see their Shade Lord advancing with hunger and Slake crackling with barely contained power, they are reminded of what they are: hunters in the void, predators who stalk the galaxy's edges, sharks circling in the darkness, waiting for the moment to strike. The names of the weapons themselves carry meaning that speaks to the chapter's existence. Hunger, the eternal gnawing need that drives the Carcharodons to seek out prey, to hunt ceaselessly, to never rest, because there is always another enemy, always another threat, always another war to fight. And Slake, the temporary satisfaction of need, the brief respite that comes from a successful kill, the moment of completion before the hunger returns and the hunt begins anew. Together, they represent the cycle that defines the chapter's existence. An endless loop of pursuit and violence, need and satisfaction, hunger and slaking, repeated across the centuries without end. There are tactical advantages to Tyberos' choice of weapons as well. In the close confines of shipboarding actions, where the Carcharodons often operate, the ability to engage enemies in melee is essential. Ranged weapons, while useful, become liabilities when fighting in narrow corridors and cramped rooms where your opponent might be mere feet away.
You know, I have to be honest with you all. When I first read about Tyberos, I thought the whole shark-themed Space Marine thing was going to be ridiculous. Like, come on, space sharks? It sounds like something from a Saturday morning cartoon. But the more I dug into his lore, the more I realized how genuinely terrifying this character is. There's something deeply unsettling about a warrior who whispers instead of shouts, who moves faster than he should be able to, whose face is literally falling apart. He's not just some gimmick, he's a nightmare wrapped in ceramite. And honestly, he might be one of the most well-executed horror characters in all of 40K. Yeah, Games Workshop really nailed it with this one. But anyways, let's get back to the story.
In such environments, Tyberos becomes an unstoppable force, his massive frame blocking entire passages, his weapons rendering anyone who tries to approach him into shredded meat. He can tear through bulkheads with the chain-fist components, cut down entire squads with sweeping strikes of the lightning claws, and punch through armored doors or sealed hatches with the power fist capability. He is a boarding weapon made flesh and ceramite, designed and armed for the kind of brutal close-quarters combat that decides the fate of void ships. But perhaps most impressively, Tyberos wields these massive, complex weapons while maintaining a speed of movement that seems to defy physics. Terminator armor is notoriously cumbersome, its massive bulk trading mobility for protection and firepower. A warrior in Terminator plate is expected to advance slowly but implacably, weathering enemy fire that would shred lesser armor while delivering devastating volleys in return. They are walking tanks, not agile fighters. Yet Tyberos, despite his size, despite his armor, despite carrying weapons that would burden even another Terminator, moves through combat with a fluidity and speed that witnesses struggle to comprehend. This leads us to the next aspect of his legend, the way he fights, and why the simple act of Tyberos the Red Wake engaging in melee combat has become something spoken of with awe and horror throughout the sectors where he has waged war. The Red Wake in battle. The title Red Wake is not merely honorific, it is a precise description of what Tyberos leaves behind when he engages in melee combat. Those who have witnessed him in battle and survived to report on it speak in terms that border on the mythological, describing a warrior who seems to transcend the normal limitations of size and mass to become something approaching supernatural in his killing efficiency. The Imperial armor volume that details the Bardab War provides one of the few official accounts of Tyberos in combat, and the language used is striking. Witnesses recall him as a blood-splattered killing machine, moving almost too fast for the eye to see, leaving nothing but mangled and shredded corpses after his passing. This is not hyperbole or poetic license. This is the measured assessment of trained military observers, describing what they saw when Tyberos the Red Wake entered battle against the secessionist forces during the Bardab campaign. A warrior in Terminator armor, weighing well over a ton when fully equipped, somehow moving with such speed that the human eye could barely track his movements. The contradiction inherent in this description is what makes Tyberos so terrifying. Our understanding of physics tells us that something of his mass should not be able to move that quickly. The servos and artificial muscles that power Terminator armor, while incredibly strong, must work against substantial inertia. A warrior of Tyberos's size, in armor designed to withstand heavy weapons fire, should be slow, ponderous, advancing with steady but measured steps. Instead, he seems to flow through combat zones, his movements economical and precise, wasting no energy on unnecessary flourishes, every step taking him exactly where he needs to be, every strike hitting with perfect timing and maximum impact. Theories abound about how Tyberos achieves this seemingly impossible combination of mass and speed. Some suggest his armor incorporates lost technology from the Dark Age, modifications to the servo systems that allow for greater responsiveness than standard patterns. Others point to his gene seed, speculating that whatever genetic legacy flows through his veins has granted him reflexes and reaction times that exceed even the already superhuman baseline of the Adeptus Astartes. Still others wonder if his massive size is not merely a matter of physical growth, but represents some fundamental optimization of the Space Marine transformation process, creating a warrior who is essentially a superior version of what a transhuman soldier should be. The truth, as with so much about Tyberos, remains unknown. What matters is the result, and the result is a combatant who combines the unstoppable force of a walking tank with the precision and speed of an elite duelist. This combination manifests in specific ways that witnesses have noted. Tyberos does not wade into battle like a berserker, swinging wildly and relying on his armor to protect him from retaliation. Instead, his attacks are calculated, precise, each strike of hunger and slake aimed at maximum effect. He targets weak points in enemy formations, command units that need to be eliminated, heavy weapons teams that threaten his forces. He moves with purpose, not wasting energy on unnecessary combat when his objective lies elsewhere. If enemies are between him and his goal, they die, torn apart by lightning claws, or crushed by power fist strikes, or shredded by roaring chain fists. But he does not linger to ensure every last enemy is dead when others can finish the job. He is the tip of the spear, the killing blow, the moment of catastrophic violence that breaks enemy resistance and allows his forces to pour through the breach he creates. Yet this cold, calculated efficiency exists alongside moments of such terrible savagery that they seem to contradict his methodical approach. The phrase blood splattered is chosen deliberately in the Imperial records. When Tyberos kills, it is not clean. The combination of chain fist, lightning claw, and power fist does not produce neat casualties. It produces carnage. Bodies are torn open, armor split like rotten fruit, limbs severed and sent flying, blood spraying in arterial jets that coat everything nearby, including Tyberos himself. By the end of an engagement, he is typically drenched in the gore of his enemies, his grey armor painted red, the trophy skulls at his waist slick with fresh blood, the lenses of his helmet obscured by viscera that he will need to clean away before he can see clearly. The trail he leaves through a battlefield is unmistakable, a path of shredded corpses and pooling blood that forms the wake that gives him his title. This contradiction between precision and savagery between cold calculation and overwhelming violence, is central to understanding Tyberos. He is not a madman, despite what his appearance might suggest. He is not driven by rage or bloodlust in the way that, say, a world eater might be. Every action is deliberate, every kill serves a purpose. But the methods he employs to achieve his objectives are so brutal, so utterly destructive, that they create an impression of mindless fury to those who do not understand what they are seeing. It is the ruthless efficiency of a perfect predator, not the random violence of a berserker. Sharks do not hate their prey. They simply kill and move on to the next target, and Tyberos embodies this principle completely. The novel Outer Dark provides additional details about his combat style during the Carcharodon's war against Tyranid hive fleets. In one scene near the end of the book, Tyberos faces 3 Tyranid warriors, elite bioforms that serve as synaptic nodes for the lesser creatures of the swarm. These are not weak enemies. Tyranid warriors stand taller than a space marine, possess multiple limbs wielding lethal bioweapons, are covered in thick chitinous plates that can turn bolter rounds, and are driven by a gestalt alien intelligence that allows them to coordinate their attacks with perfect efficiency. They are designed by evolution and the hive mind to be the ultimate killing machines, perfect organisms for war. Tyberos kills all 3 in seconds. The text does not waste time on the details because the details are not necessary. In the space between one breath and the next, 3 elite bioforms that have killed countless Imperial soldiers are reduced to twitching heaps of alien flesh, their bodies shredded beyond recognition by hunger and slake. And then, without pausing, without even acknowledging the difficulty of what he has just accomplished, Tyberos sees a Tyranid boarding pod nearby, one of the bioships that the Hive fleet uses to attach to enemy vessels and disgorge warrior organisms into their corridors. Most commanders would avoid such a pod, recognizing it as a death trap, a confined space filled with unknown numbers of hostile aliens. Tyberos walks up to it, enters it, and proceeds to silently slaughter everything inside. The use of the word silently in that passage is significant. This is not an omission or stylistic choice. Tyberos fights in silence, maintaining the eerie quiet that characterizes all Carcharodon engagements. He does not bellow battle cries. He does not roar challenges at his foes. He does not waste breath on threats or taunts. He simply kills, moving from target to target with mechanical efficiency, and the only sounds are the mechanical noises of his armor, the scream of chain fist blades, the wet tearing of lightning claws parting flesh, and the heavy impacts of power, fist strikes. His enemies die without knowing what hit them. Or in those final seconds when they realize their death has come, they face it in terrible silence, broken only by Tyberos's occasional whispered words, too soft to hear clearly, but carrying nonetheless. This silence amplifies his horror. Humans are social creatures. We expect combat to be loud, to be accompanied by shouts and screams, and the various noises of men fighting for their lives. When those sounds are absent, when death comes quietly, it becomes infinitely more disturbing. The Carcharodons understand this instinctively. Their deliberate lack of war cries, their preference for operating without vox chatter or verbal communication, creates a psychological impact on enemies that is as valuable as any weapon. And Tyberos, whispering rather than shouting even in the midst of the fiercest fighting, takes this to its logical extreme. He is the ultimate expression of his chapter's doctrine, a warrior who has stripped away every unnecessary element until only the pure essence of killing remains. But we should not mistake this cold efficiency for lack of emotion. Tyberos is not a machine, though he sometimes seems to function like one. He is a space marine, a transhuman warrior of the Adeptus Astartes, and such warriors are capable of fierce loyalty, of brotherhood, of devotion to causes greater than themselves. What Tyberos has done is channel all such emotions into a single focused purpose. He serves the Emperor. He leads his chapter. He hunts the enemies of mankind. Everything else, Every personal feeling or individual desire or thought that does not serve these goals has been ruthlessly suppressed or directed toward his duty. It is an extreme form of the discipline that all Space Marines must learn, taken to levels that most chapters would consider excessive, but which is absolutely necessary for the Carcharodons to survive their endless exile. And so when Tyberos enters battle, he brings with him not just his physical might and his terrible weapons, but the focused will of someone who has spent centuries honing himself into the perfect instrument of his chapter's purpose. His warriors follow him because they know he will lead them to victory or die trying. His enemies flee before him because they recognize in his advance the inevitability of death. And those caught between these two groups, whether they are allies witnessing his aid or enemies facing his wrath, can only watch in awe or terror as the Red Wake does what he was created to do, bringing destruction to the enemies of mankind with ruthless, silent, unstoppable efficiency. The trail of blood and bodies he leaves behind is not cruelty for its own sake. It is simply the cost of his purpose, the price that must be paid, and Tyberos pays it without hesitation or remorse, because that is what it means to be the Shade Lord of the Carcharodons Astra. The Badab War. Blood in the Maelstrom. The Badab War stands as one of the most significant internal conflicts in the Imperium's recent history, a rebellion that pitted Space Marine chapter against Space Marine chapter in a brutal struggle that would claim thousands of Astartes' lives and devastate entire sectors. It is also the campaign that would bring Tyberos and the Carcharodons into the light, allowing the wider Imperium a rare glimpse of these mysterious warriors and cementing the Red Wake's reputation as one of the most ruthless commanders in the Adeptus Astartes. The conflict began with Luft Huron, chapter master of the Astral Claws, a chapter stationed in the Maelstrom Zone to protect the Imperium's borders from the various threats that emerged from that region of space where the warp and reality bleed together. Huron was an ambitious warrior who saw the inefficiencies and corruption within the imperial bureaucracy and decided he could do better. He refused to pay tithes, withheld his chapter's gene seed from the Mechanicus, and began building a small empire within the Maelstrom Zone, convincing several other chapters to join him in this act of defiance. The Imperium responded, as it always does to rebellion, with overwhelming force, and what began as a dispute over resources and authority escalated into full-scale war. By the time the Carcharodons arrived, the Badab War had been raging for years. Multiple loyalist chapters had been deployed to bring the so-called secessionists to heel, and the fighting had reached a bloody stalemate. The Astral Claws and their allies, the Mantis Warriors, the Lamenters, and the Executioners, were hardened and determined, fighting with the skill and equipment of full Astartes chapters. They knew the region intimately, had fortified key systems, and were led by commanders who had spent centuries studying the art of war. Breaking them would not be easy, would not be quick, and would cost the loyalists dearly. Into this situation came the Carcharodons, arriving without warning at the edge of the Golgothan wastes, their fleet emerging from the void, dark like sharks scenting blood in the water. Their appearance alarmed both sides initially. No one had summoned them. No one knew they were coming. They were not part of any deployment schedule or battle plan. They simply appeared, a force of unknown size and capability, their intentions unclear and their loyalty uncertain. The grey-armoured warriors could have been reinforcements for either side, or a third faction pursuing their own agenda. Tyberos resolved this uncertainty with characteristic efficiency. He presented himself to the Inquisitor Legate overseeing the loyalist forces and produced notices patent, ancient documents affirming the Carcharodons' rights and titles, writs that had been issued by High Lords of Terror and Inquisitors long dead, papers that proved the chapter's loyalty even if they raised more questions about the chapter's origins and purpose. He submitted himself to psychic probing and gene seed sampling, allowing the Imperium's representatives to verify that the Carcharodons were indeed loyalist Astartes, and not some elaborate trick of the enemy. And he offered his forces to Lord High Commander Karab Kholon of the Red Scorpions, the Magister Militum, commanding all loyalist forces, requesting permission to enter the war zone and, in his words, draw blood. Cullen accepted, though he remained wary of these mysterious arrivals and their deviations from Codex doctrine. He could afford to be suspicious, but not to refuse aid. The war was grinding on, casualties mounting, and the secessionists showed no signs of breaking. If the Carcharodons wanted to fight, he would let them fight and judge them by their deeds. What he got was far more than he had bargained for. A campaign of systematic annihilation that would break the back of secessionist resistance but leave everyone who witnessed it profoundly disturbed by the methods employed. The Carcharodons were assigned to deal with the Endymion cluster, a group of worlds that owed loyalty to the Mantis warriors. These planets provided resources and recruits to the secessionist forces, and as long as they remained unconquered, the war would continue. Other chapters might have approached this objective with a degree of restraint, attempting to bring the worlds back into compliance through negotiation or targeted strikes against military installations. The Carcharodons had neither the time nor the inclination for such niceties. They implemented a scorched earth policy, systematically destroying infrastructure, slaughtering populations, and leaving behind nothing that could support military operations. Planet after planet felt the wrath of the Grey Tide. Orbital bombardments shattered cities. Drop pod assaults saw Tyberos and his Red Brethren Terminators crashing into command bunkers and fortresses, leaving nothing alive in their wake. Ground forces advanced in silence, killing without mercy, taking what they needed and destroying what they could not use. The Carcharodons were not interested in holding territory or administering conquered worlds. They were interested in denying those worlds to the enemy, in forcing the Mantis warriors to choose between abandoning their population to slaughter or committing forces to defend them, forces that would then be destroyed by the Carcharodons' methodical advance. The Mantis warriors could not stand by and watch their people suffer. Chapter Master Vailund Kal led his forces into the Endymion cluster, attempting to evacuate civilians and slow the Carcharodons' advance. But the Grey Warriors were unrelenting. They struck from unexpected angles, using their fleet's mobility to isolate Mantis warriors' forces and destroy them piecemeal. They did not waste time on honorable engagements or fair fights. They identified the enemy, calculated the optimal method to destroy them, and executed that plan with cold efficiency. Company after company of the Mantis warriors was ground down in desperate battles, their numbers dwindling as losses mounted faster than they could be replaced. Tyberos led from the front throughout this campaign, his Red Brethren serving as the tip of every major assault. When a fortress needed to be breached, he was there, hunger and slake tearing through blast doors that had been designed to withstand siege cannons. When enemy leadership needed to be eliminated, he led boarding actions against Mantis warrior vessels, cutting through their defenders with such speed that resistance crumbled before it could organize. When the Carcharodons needed to make a statement, needed to demonstrate that there would be no mercy and no respite, Tyberos provided the necessary demonstration, leaving fields of shredded corpses that served as warnings to anyone who might consider continuing their resistance. The campaign culminated in the assault on Badab Primaris itself, the heart of Luft Huron's empire, where the tyrant of Badab had established his seat of power in an orbital fortress known as the Palace of Thorns. While other loyalist forces assaulted the palace directly, the Carcharodons were given a different objective: the planetary infrastructure that supported Badab Primaris, the geothermal reactors and industrial complexes that provided power and material to the secessionist war machine. Tyberos interpreted his orders with characteristic ruthlessness. Rather than simply capturing or disabling these facilities, the Carcharodons sabotaged them in ways that would cause catastrophic failures. They breached reactor cores, set off chain reactions in industrial centers, and triggered geological instabilities that would doom the planet. The result was exactly what they intended: a series of tectonic upheavals that broke the back of secessionist resistance on Badab Primaris and initiated a process that would eventually render large portions of the world uninhabitable. Over 5 billion people would die as a result of what the Carcharodons did during those final days of the Badab War, though the chapter would argue that those deaths were militarily necessary to break the stalemate and end the conflict. When the fighting ended, when Lufgit-Huron fled into the Maelstrom with the remnants of his forces and the surviving secessionists surrendered or were executed, the Carcharodons received their payment for services rendered. With the tacit agreement of the Fire Angels, who had been granted control of the Endymion cluster by the victorious loyalists, Tyberos led his forces back to the cluster one final time. They visited the Tranquility System, where the Mantis warriors had maintained hidden fortresses and supply caches. These facilities were ransacked, their contents claimed by the Carcharodons to replace losses incurred during the campaign. But the Red Tithe was not complete. A generation of young men from the Tranquility System were taken by the Carcharodons, forcibly recruited to replace the Battle Brothers lost during years of fighting. These were not volunteers. They were not aspirants who had shown interest in joining the Adeptus Astartes. They were simply the survivors of the Carcharodons' selection process, young males of the right age who were deemed potentially suitable for transformation into Space Marines. The chapter forced them to fight each other to the death, taking only the survivors as recruits. It was a brutal harvest, even by the grim standards of the 41st Millennium, but it was necessary for the chapter's survival, and Tyberos authorized it without hesitation. And then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the Carcharodons departed, disappearing back into the void dark from which they had emerged. They left behind a reputation for ruthlessness and efficiency that would be spoken of throughout the Imperium for years to come. Lord Commander Cullen, who had commanded them during the war, would later admit that while he could not deny their effectiveness, he was profoundly disturbed by their methods and grateful that they had departed. Other commanders who had fought alongside them echoed similar sentiments: respect mixed with unease, gratitude for their aid, combined with relief that they were gone. But for Tyberos and the Carcharodons, the Badab War was simply another campaign, another bloody chapter in their eternal hunt. They had done what needed to be done, paid the cost that needed to be paid, and taken what they needed to continue their existence. The millions of dead, the worlds devastated, the gene seed harvested from fallen brothers, all of it was simply the price of war. And war was their purpose, their penance, their eternal duty. The Red Wake had left his mark on the Maelstrom Zone, and that mark would not soon be forgotten. The Red Tithe and Grey Tithe. To understand how the Carcharodons sustain themselves, how they continue to function as a chapter despite their exile and isolation, we must examine in detail the two pillars that support their existence, the Red Tithe and the Grey Tithe. These practices define the chapter's relationship with the wider Imperium and reveal the ruthless pragmatism that has allowed them to endure for millennia in the void dark beyond the galaxy's edge. The Red Tithe is, at its core, a recruitment practice, but one so harsh and brutal that it borders on the horrifying. Other Space Marine chapters recruit from specific worlds, maintaining relationships with the populations they draw from, establishing recruiting worlds where being chosen to become an Astartes is considered the highest honor a young man can achieve. The Ultramarines recruit from the 500 worlds of Ultramar, the Space Wolves from the tribes of Fenris, the Blood Angels from the artistic warriors of Baal. There is a tradition to these practices, a sense of continuity and mutual obligation between the chapter and the worlds that provide its warriors. The Carcharodons have no such luxury. They have no recruiting worlds. They have no stable population from which to draw aspirants. They are exiles, ranging far beyond the Imperium's borders, and when their numbers are depleted by war, They must take what they need from whatever resources are available. The Edicts of Exile, those ancient documents that Tyberos presented during the Baydab War, grant them the right to conduct the Red Tithe, to descend upon imperial worlds and harvest the population for their needs. The process is brutal in its efficiency. When a battle shoal's numbers have fallen dangerously low, when casualties threaten the shoal's ability to function as an effective military force, the Reaper Prime, the captain responsible for maintaining recruitment, will identify a suitable target. This is typically a world far from the Imperium's heart, often a prison planet, a death world, or some other harsh environment where the population is already accustomed to violence and suffering. The Carcharodons do not want soft recruits from civilized worlds. They want survivors, individuals who have already proven their ability to endure hardship. The chapter descends without warning. There is no negotiation, no ceremony, no attempt to make the process palatable. Grey drop pods streak through the atmosphere, disgorging Carcharodon warriors who immediately begin rounding up suitable candidates. The criteria are strict. Males of the right age, typically between 10 and 14 years old, who show the physical characteristics necessary to survive the transformation process. But the numbers taken go far beyond what is needed for recruitment alone. The vast majority of those taken will never become Space Marines. They will instead become chapter serfs, the countless laborers necessary to maintain a fleet-based chapter's operations. Someone must crew the ships that carry the Carcharodons through the void. Someone must maintain the weapons and armor. Someone must prepare food, manage supplies, perform the 1,000 mundane tasks necessary to keep a military organization functioning. Other chapters use volunteers or descendants of their original crew complement for these roles. The Carcharodons take what they need, transforming prisoners and press-ganged civilians into a slave workforce that will spend the rest of their lives serving the chapter in the bowels of their ships. Those deemed potentially suitable for transformation into Space Marines face a different fate, one that is in many ways even harsher than servitude. The trials begin immediately. The aspirants are not given time to adjust to their new situation, to come to terms with being taken from their homes. They are thrown into brutal tests of survival, combat trials where they must fight to prove their worth. And the most notorious of these trials is also the simplest and most savage: forced combat to the death among the aspirants themselves. Imagine being one of these young men. You are taken from your world without warning, separated from everything you have ever known, transported to a massive warship filled with silent grey warriors who regard you with black, expressionless eyes. You are given a weapon, perhaps a simple blade or club, and thrown into an arena with dozens of others like yourself. And you are told that only the survivors will be granted the honor of continuing in the trials. The rest will die here, killed by their fellow aspirants, their bodies disposed of without ceremony or remembrance. This is not how most chapters recruit. The Space Wolves have their tests of strength and courage on the ice wastes of Fenris. The Blood Angels have their trials of art and combat. The Ultramarines have structured programs designed to identify the best candidates through a series of escalating challenges. But the Carcharodons do not have time for such lengthy processes. They need warriors now. And they need warriors who have already proven they can kill without hesitation, who can make the hard choices necessary to survive. So they force their aspirants to become killers before the transformation even begins. The attrition rate is horrifying. For every aspirant who survives to become a scout in the 10th Company, dozens or even hundreds have died in the trials. It is wasteful by the standards of the Codex Astartes, an inefficient use of resources that any administratum overseer would condemn. But it produces exactly the kind of warrior the Carcharodons need. Survivors who have already lost their innocence, who understand that mercy is a luxury they cannot afford, who will fight with the cold ruthlessness necessary to survive in the outer darkness where the chapter makes its home. Tyberos oversees this process personally during major recruitment drives. He does not delegate such important decisions to subordinates. He watches the aspirants fight, evaluating their technique, their determination, their willingness to do whatever is necessary to survive. And when the trials are complete, when the arena floor is slick with blood and only a handful of young men remain standing, he approaches these survivors and speaks to them in his characteristic whisper. He tells them that they have proven themselves worthy. He tells them that they will become part of something greater than themselves. He does not promise them glory or honor or any of the things that other chapters might use to inspire their recruits. He simply tells them the truth, that they will fight, they will kill, and they will probably die in service to the Emperor, and that this is the only purpose they will ever need. The grey tithe is the other pillar supporting the Carcharodon's existence, though it is less viscerally horrifying than the red tithe, and more mysterious in its execution. Where the red tithe provides the chapter with people, the grey tithe provides them with material, with the weapons, armor, ammunition, and equipment necessary to wage war across the centuries. Other Space Marine chapters receive supplies through established relationships with the Adeptus Mechanicus. Forge worlds are assigned to support specific chapters, providing them with new war gear and maintaining their existing equipment in exchange for various services and ancient pacts that date back to the founding of the Imperium. But the Carcharodons are exiles operating far beyond the reach of most Forge worlds, and they cannot rely on regular resupply from the Mechanicus. Instead, they must trade for what they need, and what they have to trade is archaeotech, ancient technology that the Mechanicus prizes above almost all else. The Harvester Primes, those captains designated to seek out lost technology, range across the void, dark, searching for these treasures. They explore dead worlds where ancient civilizations once flourished. They raid the tombs of long-extinct Xenos species. They recover technology from battlefields where great wars were fought and lost millennia ago. They strip wrecked ships of their archaeotech components. They delve into ruins that predate the Imperium, places where humanity's Dark Age technology lies waiting to be reclaimed. It is dangerous work, often bringing them into contact with enemies who also seek such treasures, but it is necessary for the chapter's survival. When enough archaeotech has been gathered, when the Harvester Primes have accumulated a sufficient stockpile of ancient artifacts and lost technology, the chapter conducts a grey tithe. The various battle shoals reunite at designated meeting points, locations that are kept secret from the wider Imperium, but which are known to certain elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The most significant of these gathering places is referred to in Carcharodon lore as the Lost World. A grey orb wrapped in perpetual mists, its surface covered with ancient monuments and ruins that suggest it was once a place of great importance to the chapter. At these gatherings, representatives of the Mechanicus arrive to examine what the Carcharodons have recovered. Tech priests study the artifacts with the reverence of religious devotees confronting holy relics, for that is effectively what archaeotech represents to them. Physical manifestations of the technological heights that humanity once achieved and has since lost. They evaluate the items, determining their worth based on age, condition, uniqueness, and potential applications. And in exchange for these treasures, they provide the Carcharodons with new weapons and armor, ammunition, spare parts, raw materials, everything the chapter needs to continue their eternal hunt. It is a transaction both sides understand. The Mechanicus gains access to technology that might unlock secrets lost during the Age of Strife. The Carcharodons gain the supplies necessary to wage war without a homeworld or reliable supply lines. Neither side trusts the other completely. The tech priests regard the Carcharodons with suspicion, uncertain of their origins, and uncomfortable with their deviations from standard chapter organization. The Carcharodons view the Mechanicus with the wariness of those who must deal with outsiders but cannot afford to make enemies. But the relationship endures because both sides need what the other provides. Tyberos attends these grey tithes personally, ensuring that the negotiations are conducted fairly and that the chapter receives adequate compensation for the treasures they have risked their lives to recover. He stands as a silent, imposing presence during the discussions. His massive form, a reminder that the Carcharodons are warriors first and traders second, that they will not be cheated or dismissed. The tech priests are careful in their dealings with him, aware that angering the Shade Lord of the Carcharodons would be both dangerous and counterproductive. Together, the Red Tithe and Grey Tithe form a cycle that has sustained the Carcharodons for millennia. They take people to maintain their numbers, they take technology to equip those people, and then they use both to continue their war against the enemies of mankind. It is a brutal, pragmatic system that would horrify many Imperial citizens if they knew the details, but it works. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, what works is often all that matters. Tyberos understands this completely, and he ensures that both tithes are conducted with the efficiency and ruthlessness necessary to guarantee his chapter's survival, regardless of what others might think of their methods. Silent command. The leadership of Tyberos' leadership among the Adeptus Astartes takes many forms. Some chapter masters rule through charisma and inspiration, their very presence rallying their warriors to acts of heroism. Others lead through strategic brilliance, orchestrating campaigns across multiple sectors with the skill of master chess players. Still others command through sheer force of personality, their authority absolute and unquestioned. Tyberos the Red Wake embodies a different model of leadership, one built on cold efficiency, calculated ruthlessness, and an aura of barely contained menace that makes defiance unthinkable. He leads by example, always fighting at the forefront of the most dangerous engagements, but he does not lead through heroic speeches or inspirational rhetoric. His commands are delivered in those characteristic whispers, soft words that somehow cut through the chaos of battle to reach those who need to hear them. When Tyberos speaks, his warriors obey instantly, not because they have been inspired or persuaded, but because they know with absolute certainty that his orders represent the optimal path to victory. There is no room for discussion, no possibility of questioning his judgment. He has assessed the tactical situation, calculated the best response, and issued commands that will be followed without deviation. This absolute authority stems partly from his position as Shade Lord, the ancient title used by the Carcharodons for their chapter master. But it goes deeper than mere rank. Tyberos has earned his position through centuries of service, through countless battles where his decisions have led to victory, and his tactical acumen has saved his warriors from annihilation. The Carcharodons are not a chapter that tolerates incompetent leadership. They exist in conditions of extreme hardship, where a single mistake can doom an entire battle shoal, and they cannot afford to follow commanders who do not prove their worth through results. Tyberos has proven his worth again and again, and his warriors follow him because they know he will lead them to victory or die trying. And survival is the only currency that matters in the outer darkness. His leadership style reflects the chapter's broader philosophy. The Carcharodons do not value individual glory or personal ambition. They are collective predators, functioning as a single organism when they hunt, each warrior a tooth in the jaws of a vast shark that circles through the void. Tyberos embodies this philosophy perfectly. He does not seek glory for himself. His actions are not motivated by a desire for recognition or honor. He simply does what is necessary to accomplish the chapter's mission, and if that requires him to personally lead a boarding action against a Tyranid bioship, or to infiltrate an enemy fortress and eliminate its command structure, then he does so without hesitation. But he is not a micromanager who needs to control every aspect of every operation. The Carcharodons' organization, with its autonomous battle shoals operating independently for years at a time, requires captains who can think for themselves and make tactical decisions without constant oversight. Tyberos understands this, and he empowers his company masters to act with considerable autonomy while still ensuring they adhere to the broader strategic directives he has established. This is where the Red Brethren, The elite First Company Terminators, who serve as his personal guard, become crucial to his command structure. The Red Brethren are not merely bodyguards, though they certainly serve that function when Tyberos enters combat. They are also his enforcers, warriors dispatched to the various battle shoals to ensure those shoals follow the chapter's overall strategy and do not deviate from their assigned missions. A Red Brethren veteran assigned to a shoal serves multiple functions. They provide elite combat capability, augmenting the shoal's strength during critical engagements. They offer tactical advice based on the broader intelligence available to the chapter leadership. And most importantly, they serve as the eyes and ears of Tyberos himself, reporting back on how the shoal is performing and ensuring that company masters remain focused on their objectives rather than pursuing their own agendas. This might seem like micromanagement from a distance, but it is actually a sophisticated system of distributed command that allows Tyberos to maintain strategic control while still granting tactical flexibility to his subordinates. The Red Brethren are not there to second-guess every decision or to override company masters on minor matters. They intervene only when a shoal is deviating significantly from its mission parameters, or when a company master has lost focus on what truly matters. The rest of the time, they fight alongside their brothers and provide whatever assistance is needed. It is a system that balances autonomy with accountability, allowing the chapter to operate across vast distances while still maintaining cohesion. The novel Red Tithe provides an example of this system in action through the character of Strike Leader Kahu, a Red Brethren veteran assigned to the Third Company during their operation on the prison world of Zartak. Kahu's presence makes it clear to everyone, including the Third Company's leadership, that this mission has been designated as critically important by Tyberos himself. The objectives must be accomplished regardless of cost, and Kahu has been sent to ensure that happens. He does not need to issue orders or threaten anyone. His mere presence, the knowledge that he reports directly to the Red Wake, is sufficient to keep everyone focused on their assigned tasks. This use of the Red Brethren as enforcers and observers is emblematic of Tyberos' leadership style. He does not need to be everywhere at once, because he has created a system where his authority extends through trusted veterans who understand his methods and share his commitment to the chapter's purpose. And when these veterans report back to him, when the battle shoals reunite and information is exchanged, Tyberos absorbs all of it, building a comprehensive understanding of the strategic situation that allows him to make informed decisions about where to deploy his forces and how to prosecute the chapter's endless war. His command post is the Nikor, that ancient battle barge that has served as the chapter's mobile fortress monastery for millennia. In Outer Dark, we are given glimpses of Tyberos aboard his flagship, seated on a throne that emphasizes his role as judge and executioner. He receives reports from his captains, listens to their assessments of various threats and opportunities, and issues new directives based on the information he receives. These audiences are not discussions or debates. Tyberos asks questions, receives answers, and renders decisions. His captains may offer input or raise concerns, but they do so knowing that his final judgment is absolute. Yet there is no cruelty in how he exercises his authority. Tyberos does not punish failure when failure was unavoidable. He does not demand the impossible from his warriors. What he requires is obedience, honesty, and a willingness to do whatever the mission demands. Warriors who meet these standards are treated with the respect due to fellow predators. Those who fail to meet them, whether through cowardice, incompetence, or treachery, are dealt with swiftly and without mercy. It is a leadership style that creates absolute clarity. Everyone knows exactly what is expected of them. Everyone understands the consequences of failure, and everyone recognizes that Tyberos himself will hold to the same standards he imposes on others. This last point is crucial. Tyberos does not ask his warriors to do anything he would not do himself. When the chapter faces its most dangerous foes, when missions require someone to enter kill zones that no one expects to survive, Tyberos goes himself, often taking only a handful of Red Brethren with him. He leads every major assault personally, He boards enemy vessels when other commanders would send subordinates. He faces the greatest threats on every battlefield, drawing enemy attention to himself and away from his more vulnerable warriors. This is not suicidal bravery or a death wish. It is calculated leadership. Tyberos recognizing that his enhanced size, superior equipment, and centuries of combat experience make him uniquely suited to handle the most dangerous tasks, and therefore it is logical for him to undertake those tasks rather than waste the lives of warriors who might be needed elsewhere. His warriors respect this. They see their Shade Lord fighting beside them, bleeding alongside them, when injuries penetrate even his formidable armor, sharing in the dangers they face rather than commanding from a safe distance. And this respect translates into loyalty that goes beyond mere obedience. The Carcharodons would follow Tyberos into any battle, face any enemy, endure any hardship, because they know he would do the same for them. And in a chapter that has stripped away concepts like honor and glory, that kind of reciprocal trust is the only bond that matters. It is also worth noting that Tyberos serves simultaneously as both chapter master and first company master, holding two positions that are usually separated in codex-compliant chapters. This dual role reflects both his exceptional capabilities and the practical realities of the Carcharodon's organization. As Shade Lord, he sets strategy and coordinates the various battle shoals. As Master of the Red Brethren, he leads the chapter's elite warriors in combat. Most commanders would find this division of responsibilities overwhelming, would struggle to balance strategic oversight with tactical execution. Tyberos manages both seamlessly because he has made them inseparable aspects of his purpose. He leads by doing, and what he does is wage war with ruthless efficiency. When we consider Tyberos as a leader, we must understand that he represents a particular model of command that is well suited to the Carcharodon's unique circumstances, but which might not work in other chapters. He is not warm or personable. He does not inspire love or devotion in the traditional sense. He commands through competence, through demonstrated results, through the absolute certainty that following his orders represents the best chance of survival and victory. And in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, where the chapter hunts enemies that could destroy them utterly, that kind of leadership is exactly what they need. Tyberos the Red Wake is not a hero in any conventional sense. He is the supreme predator, the alpha of a pack of killers, and he leads them exactly as such a figure should, with cold efficiency and unstoppable determination. Against the Tyrannid swarm. The Tyrannids represent one of the most existential threats facing the Imperium in the 41st Millennium, and for the Carcharodons, operating at the galaxy's edge, they are an enemy encountered with disturbing frequency. These encounters have defined much of the chapter's recent history and have pushed even their ruthless efficiency to its limits. And in these desperate wars against the Great Devourer, Tyberos has proven his worth, not just as a warrior, but as the strategic mind necessary to guide his chapter through near extinction. The events depicted in the novel Outer Dark showcase the Carcharodons at perhaps their most desperate. Multiple Tyrannid hive fleets are approaching the galactic plane, advancing through the Void Dark, where the chapter makes its home. These are not small splinter fleets or isolated tendrils of the swarm. These are major hive fleet elements, bioships numbering in the hundreds or thousands, carrying enough Tyrannid organisms to consume entire sectors. If they reach the Imperium's borders unchecked, they will unleash devastation on a scale that could doom billions of Imperial citizens. The Carcharodons have been fighting these hive fleets for years by the time the novel begins, engaging in a series of desperate battles around lonely asteroids and abandoned systems deep below the Imperium's edge. They have served as the first line of defense, the buffer that slows the Tyrannid advance and bleeds the hive fleets before they can reach populated space. But this has come at a terrible cost. The chapter is struggling to maintain its numbers, losing warriors faster than the Red Tithes can replace them. Their equipment is wearing out, maintained beyond reasonable lifespans, because the Grey Tithes cannot provide enough new material to keep pace with attrition. They are facing the real possibility of extinction, of being ground down by the sheer weight of tyrannid numbers, until nothing remains but a few scattered survivors unable to continue the fight. In this situation, Tyberos makes a calculated decision. The chapter will make a stand on the imperial world of Piety 5, using the planet and its population as a bulwark against the oncoming swarm. If they can stop the tyrannids here, if they can bleed the hive fleet sufficiently, they might be able to end this threat before it begins. But this strategy requires something the Carcharodons are not comfortable with. It requires them to interact directly with Imperial civilians, to coordinate with planetary defense forces, to operate openly rather than in the shadows. The contrast between the Carcharodons and the people they have come to defend provides much of the novel's tension. The citizens of Piety 5 are normal humans, faithful servants of the Emperor who have never seen real war, who live simple lives dominated by religious devotion and routine labor. The Carcharodons are something out of their nightmares, grey-armored giants with corpse-white faces and black eyes, speaking rarely, and then only in harsh whispers, regarding the people they are supposed to protect with what seems like cold disdain. The PDF forces are terrified of their supposed allies, unsure whether the Carcharodons represent salvation or simply a different form of doom. But Tyberos does not concern himself with the comfort of civilians. He has a mission to accomplish, and that mission requires the efficient use of all available resources. The population of Piety 5 represents potential combatants, able bodies that can be armed and organized into defensive lines. The PDF forces, while poorly equipped and trained compared to the Adeptus Astartes, can still contribute to the defense if properly deployed. And the planet itself offers strategic advantages, defensive positions that can be fortified, natural choke points that can be used to channel tyrannid assault waves into kill zones. Tyberos sees all of this with the cold clarity of a strategic mind unconcerned with sentiment, and he issues orders accordingly. The defense of Piety 5 is brutal and desperate. The tyrannids come in waves that seem endless, bioships disgorging countless organisms that throw themselves against the defensive lines with mindless determination. Hormigants and termagants form the initial waves, expendable organisms meant to probe defenses and exhaust ammunition. Behind them come tyrannid warriors, the synapse creatures that coordinate the swarm and direct it toward priority targets. Carnifexes and other massive bioforms provide heavy assault capability, smashing through fortifications that smaller organisms cannot breach. And over it all hangs the shadow presence of the hive mind itself, the gestalt consciousness that drives the swarm with cold, alien intelligence. The Carcharodons fight with their characteristic silent efficiency, holding critical positions and launching counterattacks when the tyrannid advance creates opportunities. They inflict massive casualties on the swarm, each bolter shot precisely aimed to kill rather than wound, each close combat engagement resulting in shredded tyrannid corpses. But even their enhanced physiology and superior training cannot completely overcome the weight of numbers arrayed against them. Warriors fall, their gene seed harvested by apothecaries when possible, their armor and equipment stripped for reuse. The chapter bleeds, losing brothers they cannot replace, spending lives they can ill afford to spend. And through it all, Tyberos is where the fighting is fiercest. In one memorable scene near the novel's climax, a tyrannid boarding pod attaches to the hull of a Carcharodon vessel, threatening to compromise the ship from within. Tyberos responds personally, striding to where the pod has breached the hull and confronting the bioforms as they emerge. The text describes him killing 3 tyrannid warriors in seconds, these elite organisms that have slaughtered countless Imperial soldiers, dying almost before they can register his presence. Hunger and Slake move with terrible speed, tearing through chitin and alien flesh, reducing these deadly predators to twitching corpses. But Tyberos does not stop there. He sees the boarding pod, still attached to the hull, likely containing more bioforms waiting to emerge, and rather than calling for support or waiting for the area to be secured, he simply enters it. The pod is designed to be a death trap, a confined space filled with tyrannid organisms, optimized for close combat, claws and teeth waiting in the darkness. For most warriors, entering such a space would be suicide. For Tyberos, it is simply another problem to be solved. He disappears into the pod, and the text tells us only that he silently slaughters everything inside. We are not given details of the fight because details are not necessary. Tyberos entered a confined space filled with tyrannid organisms, and when he emerged, all of those organisms were dead. The efficiency of it, the cold mechanical nature of how he approaches even the most dangerous situations, exemplifies what makes him such a terrifying combatant. The defense of Piety 5 ultimately succeeds, though at great cost. The hive fleet is bloodied sufficiently that it veers away, seeking easier prey elsewhere. The planet survives, though scarred by the fighting and with a population traumatized by what they have witnessed. And the Carcharodons depart, taking what they need, a tithe of recruits and resources to replace some of what they have lost, and then vanishing back into the void dark to continue their hunt. But the Tyrannid War is far from over. These hive fleets continue to probe the galaxy's edges, seeking weak points where they can break through and feast on the biomass within. The Carcharodons remain the primary buffer against this threat, the chapter that fights battles most Imperial citizens will never know occurred, bleeding the swarms before they can reach populated space. And Tyberos continues to lead them in this endless war, adapting his strategies to account for Tyrannid tactics, learning from each engagement, becoming ever more efficient at the grim work of slaughter that defines his existence. The Tyrannid Wars reveal something important about Tyberos that might not be apparent from his other campaigns. He is not simply a brutal warrior who solves problems through application of overwhelming violence. He is a strategic thinker capable of adapting to threats that evolve and learn from their encounters. The Tyrannid hive mind is not a mindless force. It learns, it adapts, it optimizes its bioforms based on what it encounters. Fighting such an enemy requires commanders who can think flexibly, who can recognize when tactics that worked in previous engagements are no longer effective, who can innovate in response to an evolving threat. Tyberos possesses this capability, demonstrated by the Carcharodon's success against multiple hive fleets despite being outnumbered and outmatched in terms of raw biomass. This strategic acumen, combined with his combat prowess and leadership skills, makes Tyberos one of the Imperium's most valuable assets in the ongoing war against the Tyrannids, even if the Imperium itself barely acknowledges his existence. He and his chapter wage this war in silence and obscurity, receiving no accolades or recognition, simply doing what needs to be done because it is their purpose and their duty. And when the history of the Tyrannid Wars is finally written, if such a history is ever compiled, Tyberos the Red Wake will deserve a prominent place in it. The chapter master, who held the line at the galaxy's edge and bought time for the Imperium to prepare its defenses against the Great Devourer. The mystery and the man. To speak of Tyberos is to speak of contradictions, of characteristics that should not coexist in a single individual, yet somehow combine to create something unique even among the already exceptional warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. Understanding these contradictions is essential to understanding what makes the Red Wake such a compelling and terrifying figure in the lore of Warhammer 40,000. Consider first his size. He is massive, larger than his already enormous Terminator-clad brothers, a giant who must have his armor custom-built to accommodate his frame. Physics tells us that such mass should move ponderously, that momentum and inertia would make rapid changes of direction difficult or impossible. Yet Tyberos moves with a speed that witnesses describe as almost too fast for the eye to follow, flowing through combat zones with an agility that seems to defy his bulk. How is this possible? The lore offers no clear explanation, leaving us to speculate about modifications to his armor's servo systems, about genetic enhancements beyond the normal parameters of space marine transformation, or about simple training and skill taken to levels that transcend normal limitations. Then there is his fighting style. He wields hunger and slake, weapons that combine multiple systems into complex integrated packages that should require concentration and care to use effectively. Yet in combat, he uses them with fluid efficiency, switching between modes as the tactical situation demands, making decisions in split seconds that other warriors would need minutes to calculate. The savagery of his kills, the sheer visceral brutality of what happens when hunger and slake tear into enemy formations, suggests a berserker rage, a warrior lost to bloodlust. But all accounts agree that Tyberos fights with cold calculation, every strike precisely aimed, every kill serving a tactical purpose. He is not a madman who happens to be effective. He is a perfectly controlled warrior whose methods are simply more brutal than most, because brutality is efficient. His voice presents perhaps the most unsettling contradiction. He is a chapter master, a commander who must issue orders in the chaos of battle, who needs to be heard over the din of weapons fire and explosions. Yet, he speaks only in whispers, soft words that should be drowned out by the cacophony around him. But somehow those whispers carry, cutting through the noise to reach those who need to hear them. Is this a function of his armor's vox systems? Is it some psychological effect? His whispers so unexpected that they demand attention? Or is there something more uncanny at work, some quality to his voice that allows it to be heard despite its volume? The lore does not explain, and the mystery only adds to his menace. Then we must consider his face, that corpse-white nightmare with half the bones exposed. Is this the result of injury sustained in some long-ago battle? Is it genetic mutation, the gene seed expressing itself in ways that are unusual even by Carcharodon standards? Or could it be deliberate modification, Tyberos having chosen to alter his own flesh to make himself more terrifying, to embody the predatory nature of his chapter in his very appearance? All of these explanations are plausible, and none can be confirmed. What we know is that seeing his face, on those rare occasions when he removes his helmet, is an experience that leaves even hardened warriors shaken. His role within the chapter raises further questions. He serves simultaneously as Shade Lord and Master of the First Company, holding responsibilities that would overwhelm most commanders. Yet he manages both seamlessly, setting strategy for the entire chapter while also leading elite warriors in the most dangerous engagements. How does he balance these duties? Does he sleep less than other Space Marines, using stasis or meditation to extend his active periods? Does he delegate more than we realize, trusting his captains and veteran sergeants to handle details that would consume the attention of lesser commanders? Or is his cognitive capacity simply that much greater than others, allowing him to process and respond to multiple streams of information simultaneously? Again, the lore provides no clear answers. And then there is the central question. Who was Tyberos before he became the Red Wake? Every Space Marine has an origin story, a history as a human child before the transformation process began. But with Tyberos, we know nothing. We do not know what world he came from, what his birth name was, what circumstances led to his recruitment into the Carcharodons. We do not know how long he has served as Shade Lord, whether he has held the position for decades or centuries. We do not know if he rose through the ranks in the traditional manner, or if he claimed leadership through some other means. We do not know if there were predecessors who bore the title Red Wake, or if he earned it himself through deeds that have not been recorded. The chapter maintains no records of such things, or if they do maintain them, those records are not shared with outsiders. This deliberate obscurity extends to his equipment as well. The origin of hunger and slake remains unknown. His Terminator armor is clearly ancient, but its exact pattern and provenance are mysteries. Even the gene seed that created him is uncertain. The Carcharodons are believed to be descended from the Raven Guard, and Tyberos displays some of the characteristics associated with that lineage: the pale skin, the black eyes, the predatory nature. But there are also suggestions of other genetic influences, hints that the chapter's gene seed might be chimeric. incorporating elements from multiple sources. The pale skin and black eyes could be Raven Guard traits, but they could also suggest Night Lord's heritage. The ruthless efficiency and silent approach to warfare echoes both Raven Guard's stealth doctrine and Night Lord's terror tactics. The massive size and predatory nature could even hint at World Eater's lineage, though without the obvious mental instability that usually accompanies that gene seed. These mysteries are not accidental. The Carcharodons deliberately obscure their origins and their methods. They do not want to be understood by outsiders. They do not seek validation or acceptance from the wider Imperium. They have been exiled, given a purpose that takes them far from the light of the Astronomicon, and they have embraced that exile completely. Tyberos exemplifies this philosophy, a warrior whose very existence seems designed to generate questions that cannot be answered, a figure wrapped in mysteries that he makes no effort to resolve. But beneath all the mystery, beneath the contradictions and the unanswered questions, there is a man, or at least, there was a man once. Tyberos was born human, grew up somewhere, went through experiences that shaped him before he ever wore power armor or wielded hunger and slake. That humanity has been buried beneath centuries of war, beneath genetic modification and augmentation, beneath the weight of responsibility and the necessity of making decisions that cost thousands of lives. But it must still exist somewhere, deep in the core of his being, a spark of what he was before duty and purpose consumed everything else. We catch glimpses of this underlying humanity in rare moments. His willingness to submit to psychic probing and gene seed sampling during the Badab War, knowing it would be invasive and potentially reveal secrets, but doing so anyway to prove his loyalty. His personal oversight of recruitment trials, ensuring that the aspirants are treated according to the chapter's standards, even though those standards are harsh. His presence aboard the Nicor during the Grey Tithes, standing silent watch to ensure fair dealing with the Mechanicus. These are not the actions of a mindless killing machine. These are the decisions of a being capable of understanding nuance, of recognizing when principle matters more than pride, of accepting necessary compromises while maintaining the core of what makes the Carcharodons who they are. And perhaps most tellingly, his continued service. Tyberos could have fallen to despair at the endless nature of his duty, could have succumbed to the corruption that claims so many warriors who spend too long fighting in the darkness. He could have led his chapter into renegade status, rejecting the Imperium that exiled them and pursuing their own agenda. But he has not. He continues to serve, continues to hunt the Emperor's enemies, continues to lead his warriors through war after war with no end in sight. This suggests a depth of commitment that goes beyond mere programming or indoctrination. It suggests a choice, made and renewed every day, to remain loyal to a purpose that offers no reward, no recognition, no hope of eventual rest. This is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. What drives Tyberos to continue? What keeps him fighting when he must surely know that there will be no glory, no final victory, no moment when he can lay down his weapons and rest? The answer, I suspect, is both simple and profound. He continues because it is his duty, because his warriors depend on him, because if he does not fight, then the enemies of mankind will advance unchecked, and that is unacceptable. It is the most basic motivation possible, stripped of everything except the raw core of obligation, and it is sufficient. Tyberos the Red Wake fights because someone must, and he is capable of it, and therefore he will continue until death finally claims him or the universe itself ends. It is brutal. It is uncompromising. It is, in its way, terrifyingly pure. And it makes him exactly the warrior his chapter needs, exactly the predator that hunts in the outer darkness where no one else will go. Current status and legacy. As the 41st millennium grinds toward its end, and the galaxy burns with wars that threaten to consume everything, the question naturally arises: what has become of Tyberos and the Carcharodons in the current era? The answer, as with so much about this mysterious chapter and its even more mysterious leader, is frustratingly incomplete. filled with gaps and uncertainties that only add to their legend. The most recent confirmed sighting of Carcharodon activity comes from White Dwarf issue 451, published in 2020, which describes a battle during the Indomitus Crusade. Fleet Secundus of that great crusade encountered a Carcharodon force under the command of Company Master Manfor, fighting against the Word-bearers, those traitors who have served the Chaos Gods since the Horus heresy. The account is brief and offers few details, but it confirms several important facts. The Carcharodons still exist as a functional chapter. They continue to fight the Imperium's enemies wherever they are encountered. And they have at least some contact with the Indomitus Crusade, that massive military endeavor launched by Reboot Guilliman after his resurrection to stabilize the Imperium following the opening of the Great Rift. Significantly, this account does not mention Tyberos himself. Company Master Manfor led the engaged forces, not the Shade Lord. This could mean several things. Tyberos might have been occupied elsewhere, leading other elements of the chapter in different campaigns. The Carcharodons operate across vast distances, with their various battle shoals frequently separated, so it would not be unusual for a single company to engage in battle without the chapter master being present. Alternatively, Tyberos might have been aboard the Nikor with the main fleet, coordinating strategy while subordinate commanders handled tactical engagements. This would be consistent with how the chapter has operated in the past. But there is also the grim possibility that Tyberos has fallen in battle at some point between the Badab War and the Indomitus Crusade, that the Red Wake finally met an enemy that even his enormous strength and terrible weapons could not overcome. Space Marines are not immortal, no matter how enhanced and augmented they might be. They can be killed, and the longer they fight, the more likely it becomes that they will eventually face odds they cannot survive. Tyberos has been waging war for centuries at minimum, possibly far longer. He has faced enemies ranging from Chaos Space Marines to Tyrannid hive fleets to whatever other horrors lurk in the outer darkness. Sooner or later, the odds would catch up with even the greatest warrior. Yet there is no evidence of his death, no reports of the Carcharodons conducting mourning rites or selecting a new Shade Lord. The absence of such reports is not conclusive proof. The chapter is notoriously secretive and would not necessarily announce the death of its leader to outsiders, but it suggests that Tyberos might still be alive. And given his character, given the ruthless efficiency and cold calculation that define him, it seems likely that if he were still alive, he would be doing exactly what he has always done, leading his chapter in war, hunting the Emperor's enemies, maintaining the eternal vigil that defines the Carcharodon's existence. If Tyberos still lives, if he still commands from the Nikor, then we can make educated guesses about what he and his chapter are doing in the current era. The Great Rift has torn reality open across the galaxy, creating a scar that separates the Imperium into two halves and allowing chaos to flow into real space on an unprecedented scale. New threats have emerged from beyond known space. The Necrons awakening in greater numbers, Tyrannid hive fleets approaching from multiple vectors, Orc empires growing in strength and organization. The galaxy is more dangerous now than it has been in millennia, and the Imperium is more desperate for defenders than ever. In such an environment, the Carcharodons would find no shortage of enemies to hunt. Their position at the galaxy's edge makes them ideally suited to intercept threats before they can reach the Imperium's core. Tyberos would be doing what he has always done, assessing threats, deploying his battle shoals to counter them, leading from the front when the fighting is fiercest. He would be conducting red tithes to replace losses, grey tithes to resupply his forces, maintaining the cycle that has sustained the chapter through millennia of exile. The specific battles and campaigns might be different. The enemies might have new faces or tactics, but the fundamental pattern would remain unchanged because that pattern is what works, and Tyberos does not change methods that work. The opening of the Great Rift might actually benefit the Carcharodons in certain ways. the Imperium is more willing now to accept aid from any source, even chapters as mysterious and unorthodox as the grey-armoured sharks from the void. The terrible urgency of the current situation means less scrutiny of methods and origins, less concern about deviations from Codex doctrine. If Tyberos were to bring his forces to aid a besieged sector, few would question where he came from or how his chapter maintains itself. They would simply be grateful for warriors capable of fighting with the efficiency the Carcharodons bring to every engagement. There is also the matter of the Primaris reinforcements. Rabute Gilliman has been distributing Primaris Space Marines to chapters throughout the Imperium, new warriors created using improved processes that make them larger, stronger, and more capable than the firstborn Astartes. Most chapters have accepted these reinforcements, integrating the Primaris into their ranks despite some friction over tradition and compatibility. Would the Carcharodons accept Primaris warriors? Would Tyberos allow these new Marines, created with knowledge and techniques the chapter does not possess, to join his brotherhood? The answer is unclear, but I suspect he would, because Tyberos is nothing if not pragmatic. If Primaris Marines can help the chapter survive and continue its mission, then their origins and differences would be secondary concerns. What matters is capability, and if these new warriors prove themselves capable, they would be accepted. But speculation aside, what is Tyberos's legacy? What mark has he left on the galaxy and on the lore of Warhammer 40,000? In terms of concrete achievements, the list is impressive. He led the Carcharodons through the Badab War, playing a crucial role in breaking the secessionist resistance and bringing the rebellion to an end. He has commanded his chapter in countless engagements against Tyrannid hive fleets, serving as the Imperium's first line of defense against the Great Devourer, even if the Imperium barely acknowledges his existence. He has maintained the Carcharodons as a functional fighting force, despite operating under conditions that would destroy most chapters, demonstrating leadership and strategic acumen that puts him among the best commanders the Adeptus Astartes have ever produced. But his legacy goes beyond mere military achievements. Tyberos represents something important in the lore of 40K, a different model of what a Space Marine can be, a different vision of heroism than what we usually see. He is not noble like Gilliman. He is not tragic like Sanguinius. He is not passionate like the Khan. He is cold, efficient, ruthless, stripped of everything except purpose and duty. And yet, he is heroic in his own way, a warrior who continues to fight despite knowing there will be no reward, who leads his chapter through darkness because someone must, who does terrible things because those things are necessary for humanity's survival. In the game itself, on the tabletop, Tyberos has become a favorite among players who favor elite assault armies. His rules reflect his lore perfectly, a close combat monster who makes everyone around him more dangerous while being nearly unstoppable himself. Players who field him talk about the psychological impact he has on opponents. The way seeing that massive figure with his shark claw weapons changes how the enemy approaches the game, creates opportunities and forces decisions that wouldn't exist otherwise. He is memorable in a way that many special characters are not, distinctive enough that he stands out even in a setting filled with unique and powerful individuals. And in the community, among fans and lore enthusiasts, Tyberos has developed a cult following. People love him precisely because he is mysterious, because so much about him remains unexplained, because he embodies contradictions that make him interesting. The nickname Shark Daddy, used affectionately by fans, captures the strange mix of terror and appeal that defines his character. He is terrifying, but also oddly compelling. A figure that draws interest, despite, or perhaps because of, his ruthless nature. Fan art depicts him in countless variations. Fan fiction explores possibilities and scenarios not covered in official lore. Discussions about his origins and capabilities generate passionate debate. For a character who has appeared in relatively few official sources, one Forge World rulebook, and a couple of novels, he has had an outsized impact on the community's imagination. This popularity has led to calls for more Tyberos content, for novels focused on him specifically, for a plastic model to replace the long-discontinued Forge World resin version, for more detailed exploration of the Carcharodons and their unique culture. Whether Games Workshop will respond to these calls remains to be seen. The company has shown willingness to explore lesser-known chapters and characters when fan interest is sufficient, but they also have countless other projects competing for resources. What is certain is that interest in Tyberos and the Carcharodons remains strong years after they first appeared in the Badab war books, suggesting that this mysterious chapter and its terrifying leader have secured their place in the broader tapestry of 40K lore. If Tyberos does return in future fiction or game materials, what should we hope to see? I would argue that the mystery is part of his appeal and should not be completely dispelled. We do not need to know his exact origins or have every question answered. What would be valuable is more exploration of how he thinks, of the calculations he makes, of how he balances his duties as both strategic commander and tactical leader. We could benefit from seeing him interact with other notable characters, testing his methods and philosophy against different models of leadership and command. We could learn from witnessing how he adapts to the changing threats of the current era, how a warrior who has fought for centuries adjusts his tactics when facing enemies that did not exist when he first took command. But perhaps most importantly, any future Tyberos content should maintain what makes him distinctive: the contradictions, the ruthlessness tempered by purpose, the terror made compelling by competence. He should remain a figure who operates by different rules than other heroes, who achieves victory through methods that make others uncomfortable, who represents the necessary evil that civilization requires to survive. Because that is what Tyberos is: the warrior who does what others cannot or will not, who bears burdens that would break lesser men, who hunts in the darkness so that others can live in the light. That is his legacy, and it is enough. Conclusion. The Eternal Hunter. We have journeyed far in exploring the legend of Tyberos the Red Wake, from his appearance as a corpse-white nightmare in archaic Terminator armor to his role as the supreme predator, leading a chapter of exiled hunters through the void, dark beyond the galaxy's edge. We have examined his weapons, Hunger and Slake, artifacts of unknown origin that combine multiple systems into instruments of perfect destruction. We have witnessed his methods in battle, the speed and precision that allows him to move through combat zones like a living catastrophe, leaving only shredded corpses in his wake. We have traced his path through the Badab War, where his ruthless efficiency broke secessionist resistance and cemented his reputation throughout the Imperium. We have explored how he leads the Carcharodons, balancing strategic oversight with tactical execution, commanding through competence rather than charisma. And we have grappled with the mysteries that surround him, the questions that remain unanswered despite centuries of service. What conclusion can we draw from all of this? What does Tyberos represent in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? I would argue that he represents something essential to understanding the Warhammer 40,000 setting, the recognition that heroism can take forms that are disturbing, that victory sometimes requires methods that civilization would prefer not to acknowledge, that survival in a universe filled with existential threats demands warriors who are willing to do whatever is necessary without hesitation or remorse. Tyberos is not a hero in any traditional sense. He is not inspiring. He does not deliver rousing speeches or embody virtues that we would want to emulate. He is cold, brutal, efficient, a predator who has stripped away everything except the core purpose of destroying the Emperor's enemies. Yet, he serves that purpose with absolute dedication, leading his warriors through war after war, facing horrors that would break most chapters, maintaining the eternal vigil that defines the Carcharodon's existence. That dedication, that unwavering commitment to duty despite the costs, is its own form of heroism. darker and more terrible than what we usually celebrate, but heroism nonetheless. What makes Tyberos the most ruthless space marine in Warhammer 40K? It is not merely his kill count, though that is surely astronomical. It is not just his combat prowess, though he is certainly among the deadliest close combat fighters in the entire setting. It is not simply his willingness to employ brutal methods, though the Red Tithes and the Scorched Earth campaigns demonstrate a ruthlessness that makes even hardened Imperial commanders uncomfortable. What makes Tyberos the most ruthless is the totality of what he represents: a warrior who has made himself into a perfect instrument of war, who has sacrificed everything that does not serve his purpose, who embodies efficiency and necessity to such a degree that mercy and hesitation have no place in his worldview. When we say ruthless, we mean without ruth, without compassion or pity, and Tyberos fits that definition perfectly. He does not hate his enemies in the way that a world eater might, does not take pleasure in their suffering the way a Night Lord would. He simply kills them because they are obstacles to his objectives, and obstacles must be removed. When civilians die in his campaigns, he does not celebrate their deaths or mourn them. He notes the casualties as a tactical consideration and moves on. When his own warriors fall, he ensures their gene seed is recovered and their equipment redistributed, and then he continues the mission because the mission is all that matters. This absolute focus, this complete subordination of every other consideration to the requirements of war, makes him more ruthless than warriors who kill from rage or sadism, because his ruthlessness serves a purpose beyond mere violence. And yet, we must acknowledge that this ruthlessness serves humanity's survival. The Tyranid hive fleets that Tyberos has been fighting, those massive bioswarms that advance toward the Imperium's borders, represent a threat that could consume billions of human lives if not stopped. The Carcharodon's campaigns in the Outer Dark, as brutal and costly as they are, bleed these swarms before they can reach populated space, buying time for the Imperium to prepare its defenses. The enemies that Tyberos hunts in the void, whether they are Chaos warbands, Xenos raiders, or traitor fleets, all represent threats to humanity that must be eliminated. His methods are terrible, but they are effective. And in a universe where humanity is besieged on all sides by enemies that seek its complete destruction, effectiveness is what keeps the species alive. This tension between necessary evil and moral cost is central to what makes 40K's lore compelling, and Tyberos embodies that tension perfectly. We can be horrified by what he does, while acknowledging that if we lived in the Imperium, we would be grateful that someone like him exists to do it. We can recognize the tragedy of warriors forced to become what Tyberos has become, while understanding that such warriors are necessary in a universe as hostile as the setting presents. It is uncomfortable moral territory, and that discomfort is precisely the point. As we close this exploration of Tyberos the Red Wake, I want to reflect on why this character has captured the imagination of so many fans despite his relatively limited appearances in official lore. I think it comes down to authenticity. Tyberos feels real in a way that some characters do not. He is not softened by convenient character growth or redemption arcs. He is not given motivations that make him more sympathetic or relatable. He is simply what he is, a warrior shaped by purpose and circumstances into something that is both terrible and necessary. The setting of Warhammer 40,000 is built on the premise that humanity faces existential threats requiring extreme measures to counter. Tyberos is the logical conclusion of that premise. The warrior who has internalized those extreme measures so completely that he has become their embodiment. And perhaps there is something admirable in that, in the purity of his focus, in his refusal to compromise or pretend that war is anything other than brutal necessity. In an age where we are often told that every conflict must have clear heroes and villains, where moral ambiguity is resolved in favor of comfortable certainties, Tyberos stands as a reminder that some situations resist easy categorization, that sometimes the people who do necessary work are not the people we would want to know or be. He is the monster that hunts monsters, and he has accepted what that makes him without apology or explanation. The Carcharodons continue their hunt in the void, dark beyond the galaxy's edge. The nomad predation fleet ranges across empty space where no light reaches, seeking enemies that most Imperial citizens will never know existed. The battle shoals separate and reunite in cycles measured in years or decades. The red tithes and grey tithes maintain the chapter's strength despite losses that would doom less resilient organizations. And at the center of all this, aboard the Nicor, sits Tyberos, Shade Lord and Reaper Lord, the Red Wake, supreme predator, silent judge, the warrior who whispers death and delivers it with ruthless efficiency. He will continue as he has always continued, fighting because that is what he does, killing because that is what is necessary, leading his chapter through war after war without end or rest. There will be no monuments to his victories, no songs celebrating his deeds, no retirement where he can lay down his weapons and reflect on a life spent in service. There is only the hunt, eternal and unending, until death finally claims him or the universe itself ends. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, that is perhaps the purest form of heroism available. The willingness to continue despite knowing there is no reward, no recognition, no final victory. Only the duty to fight and the knowledge that if you do not, then no one else will. This is Tyberos the Red Wake. This is the most ruthless space marine in Warhammer 40K. This is the legend that hunts in the outer darkness. And now you understand why even speaking his name in certain circles is enough to make hardened warriors fall silent. Why those who have fought beside the Carcharodons are grateful for their aid, yet relieved when they depart. Why the trail of blood and broken bodies he leaves across the galaxy serves as testament to both his effectiveness and his horror. He is the necessary evil made flesh and ceramite, the predator that hunts so that others might live, the warrior who bears burdens that would break lesser men. And the galaxy, however much it might prefer not to, needs warriors like him, because without them, without the Tyberos, who are willing to do what others cannot, humanity would have fallen long ago to the countless threats that press in from all sides. If this deep dive into the lore of Tyberos, the Red Wake, has helped you understand this fascinating character better, if you've enjoyed exploring the mysteries and contradictions that make him so compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless other stories to tell from the grim darkness of the far future, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the void dark beyond the galaxy's edge, the hunt continues, and the Red Wake still stalks through the darkness, bringing death to the Emperor's enemies with ruthless, silent efficiency. The Carcharodons endure, Tyberos endures, and the legend grows with each world that falls beneath his gaze, each enemy that faces the terror of hunger and slake, each moment when the grey tide emerges from the void to remind the galaxy that some predators hunt not for glory or pleasure, but simply because it is their purpose. And purpose is all that remains.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.